So the goal of this video is going to be pretty straightforward. We're just going to try to start up Xcode, go through the basic process of creating a project, and then make a simple Hello World app. To get really advanced with Xcode and get really advanced in iOS development, it takes a lot of time and a lot of practice, but I think if you get started with the small steps, it gets a little bit easier and a little bit more approachable, and then you can teach yourself. So to get started, what we see here is you got a little project tray, and that's pretty straightforward. But on the left, you have three options, and the playground is basically where you can test out small snippets of code. If you're working in Swift, that's great, but we're going to use Objective-C because the legacy language is a lot more developed, and there's a lot more tutorials on it out there. So we're going to create a new Xcode project, and you're approached with all these templates. So basically, templates just like give you pre-organized functions. It works like any other type of template. So like if you knew straight off the bat you would have tabs in your application, or you want to use pages to swipe, then you probably use one of those types of templates. But when you don't really have an idea what kind of app you're working with, or you're making something really simple, you probably just go with a single view application. So basically, it's just going to start us off with one page, one view, in the necessary files to start it off. So you need to name your product, and honestly, all of this stuff is pretty inconsequential. So like, just name it whatever you want. So we're going to name it Episode 1. If you have a team, which you might not because you probably don't have a developer account, don't click anything. Fill out all of this unimportant stuff. You can leave it on default. We're going to work in Objective-C, and we'll leave it universal so I can show you how to work with the UI builder in this SDK. So next we're going to hit next, and you don't need to have any of that checked. And so it's going to ask you where to save yours. Now I have a massive projects folder where I put all of my crap, but if you don't have one, you can get started with one or just throw it anywhere you really want. And now we have our first project set up. So the project basically is going to hold all of your settings for your app, and it's going to hold all of the code for it. And automatically we see we're open in the Xcode project settings, and it has all of this stuff that eventually you'll figure out how to use. But to get started, you actually really don't need to know how to use much of it. On the left side we have a tray, and this tray has all of your code. So to give you a little bit of context, you need to understand that in Objective-C, and I think in C as well, you have two types of files when you're coding. You have header files and you have implementation files, .h and .m. The specifics aren't necessary, but basically in header files you declare and you list out the components that a view will have. So like if you have a view with text fields with labels and stuff like that, you need to list it out in the header file and declare them, and then in your implementation you can use them. That might not make sense if you're not from a heavier coding background, but once we start to use it, it'll make a lot more sense. So to get started, we see that because we picked a single view, it created this view controller.h and view controller.m with some boilerplate code. So to get started, we're actually going to start with our storyboard, which is Xcode's UI builder essentially. We're going to keep it simple, and all we're going to do is we're going to have a text field, a button, and a label. So the point of this tutorial will be basically like any other Hello World tutorial. We're just going to type out, I don't know, we'll type out any message, we'll click the button, and it'll actually set it to the label. So to do so, what we're going to do is we go into this bottom right corner, and you see you actually have the option of picking objects. So these are the UI components, and there's a good couple of them. But we need a text field, and I already pretty much started. So you just type in text field, and you see that it pops up on the right side. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. I shouldn't have to explain this. You just drag and drop it in, and if you've used Photoshop, if you used anything that has like the snap guides in it, you see that it gives you alignment constraints and stuff like that. Once we selected our text field, I'm just going to stretch it out. Really, honestly, your goal should be not to follow this exactly, but to customize it so that you can get an idea and a feel of how different things work. The UI builder doesn't really need that much explanation because, quite frankly, it's pretty straightforward. It's pretty verbose. So just play around with it and test it out and see how things work. But for the sake of the video, I'm going to click on this and I'm going to add some placeholder text, enter a message or something like that. I'm going to center align it, and you could like up the font. You could like do whatever you want to make it look nice. So we're going to do that, and then I'm going to get out a button, which is what I wanted to do next, and a button will work just like a button should. and I'll just put it right underneath. I don't really care. And then our label, which we'll just throw down right underneath that. Okay. So when you're giving considerations to UI, of course, you're probably not going to smack everything in the middle of the screen, but we really don't care because we're just trying to get something up and running. So this will do. Okay, so we have 3 elements right here, and in order to make it all work together, what we're first going to do is we're going to align these and make rules so that they don't move around, right? Because if I change, down here you can actually change what device you're on. If I went on like an iPad, you see it's like awkwardly off in the left corner, which is kind of like annoying. So to make considerations for every type of view, what you need to do is you need to make rules that it'll follow so that no matter what view it's on, it'll look about the same. So the rules we're going to use are, we're going to set down here in this right corner all your constraints, what they're called UI constraints. And so if you click this one, you can click around and see what they all do, but this one lets you set rules for how far it is away from the next component. In this case, it's going to be the boundaries of this view. So it's 8 pixels away from that corner, 0 and 0 from here, and we're not going to set the bottom one because there's an item underneath it. So you would hit enter, and that adds those 3 constraints. Now you can see that no matter what, even if you were to change the device type, let's change it to this, to the iPad, see how this text field goes all the way across, so you know it works. Yeah, but as you can see, the height actually changed because we don't have a rule for how like tall it has to be. So we're going to set that now. You click on that same constraint that we were using to set the boundaries, and here you see width and height. We only need to set height because the width is determined by the length, and you just make your way down like that. So we can go with the button. I'm going to set it a top constraint, and then I don't actually care about it stretching all the way out, so I'm just going to set its width and height manually like so, and add the constraints. So now this will go up here, and so an important thing we need to note now is you see that there's this red. The red is because this thing could go in any direction in this way. That's why there's a little tick marks, because technically our rules only state, we can view them here under the ruler, that it has to be 46 pixels wide, 30 high, and that it has to be 8 pixels up from here. But we don't set any about where it could be. Like, it could be here and still be following all those rules. So to remediate that issue, we just horizontally align it in the container. So that means it has to be exactly, I'm not even clicking on it, it has to be in the exact center of the view. Now it's fine. We're going to follow the same logic for this. Top constraints, set some left and right ones, and we're just going to set the height. And now everything's set. If you want to test out that works, you can click on these other ones and see that no matter how big, how weird your view gets, it'll stay. Okay. So now that we have all of these UI components, we need to actually write the underlying code that's going to connect them and make them work together, right? So I should probably name this. I'll say, I don't know, enter. And our label, we'll just give it a predetermined text, loading. Okay. So basically what our code needs to do, as we see here, is it needs to get the text from the text field, and then it needs to actually transfer it over to the loading label when we hit enter. Before we actually write that code, we need to be able to interface this. So I told you before that there's header files, and those header files actually declare these objects here. So they connect the code to the actual UI storyboard file. So in order to do so, the way we're going to do it is the more old school way. We're going to go into our header file for this view controller, which is viewcontroller.h. If you click on this, you see it is the view controller view. We're going to make a curly bracket. So within these 2 curly brackets, we get to put all of our outlets for stuff that we'll see here and that we want to connect between our code and that little UI builder. So the declaration is called an IB outlet. It means interface builder outlet, right? Like when you plug something into an outlet, in this case, you're plugging in the UI components into this outlet. And in this case, we're making a text field, a button, and a label. We don't need a label to connect the button though, so just text field and our label. So in iOS, they have something called a UI kit, which is what all of these are under, right? They're declared in there. So it's pretty straightforward naming convention. So if we want to make a text field, you literally just type in UI text field. And the nice thing about Xcode is it has code completion. So if you just type like, in that case, it's not going to work. But if you type in like that, you can see all the options and you figure it out. So we type in UI text field, asterisk, and the name of the text field. And it's important to be detailed. So I mean, this is a pretty basic app, but we're still going to call it message text field. I camel cased it. That's just conventional, but it really doesn't matter what you do. We make a second outlet, and that's going to be our UI label. And we'll just make it message label, and we're good to go. So those are our two outlets, and as you can see, there's this little circle now popping up on the left, and what that means is that we need to connect it. It's not connected. It's empty. So we're going to connect those two by going back to our storyboard, clicking on this little symbol which represents that header file, and this very sixth tab, it's called the connection inspector, and it has all of our stuff here. So this is how we connect our code to our UI builder. You see there's message labels, so we literally just drag and drop that message text field, and you see they won't connect to anything else, only to things of their type. And so now they're linked. So whenever we use the word message label in our code, it will refer to that label, and we can see that because we hover over it, and that's the connection. You can also see that's filled on the left, so that shows that it actually is connected. And that's pretty much all we need, but one last piece we need an IB action. So just follow the syntax and then I'll explain it. So it's just the dash IB action in parentheses, and there's a suggestion. So the selector is usually the name of the action. In our case, it'll be button clicked. And you can delete this or keep it. I don't care what you do with it. Right, so then you use semicolon. Note that you end every line with semicolon. Right, so an IB action is like an outlet in that it connects your UI builder to your code. But in this case, an action does what an action does. It detects when something happens in the view. So in our case, we want to check when the button's clicked. So we make an IB action called the button clicked. And as you can see, it's disconnected right now. So we'll go to storyboard, same exact process. And we go down and you see this received action. It's called button clicked. If we hover it over the button, it gives us options now. Now these options just describe how it's triggered. So like, let's say you could do touchdown. So as soon as they press the button and it goes into a down state, it'll trigger. We usually do touch up inside because if you were to accidentally click a button, you could actually slide your hand off of the button and it would cancel the event. And that's why whenever you like mess up in some application and you realize you're hitting a button you don't want to hit, you can like slide it off to the side, let go, and it'll cancel the event. So that's what we're going to use. You can use touchdown, anything you want, play around with it. And that's pretty much all we actually have to connect. We've connected our button, we've connected our toLabel and our text field, and that's pretty much all we need to make this work. Okay, so we're going to go into our implementation file, our .m file, and you can see it's already complaining. And it's complaining because we haven't defined our button click method, which we haven't, that's true. And we automatically see that we have this view did load and did receive memory warning. Of course, given that this is a beginner's video, this is not important. This did receive memory warning, but you should just leave it there and let it do its thing. And the view did load is pretty much like, it's the first view called, right? So if you have any code, like configuration code that you wanted to do, like, I don't know, you want to set the text field to have some specific text every time it loads or something like that, like a welcome screen or something like that, you put in the view did load, and that would always get called when the view is first created. In our case, we don't care much for that. We're going to create our own IB action, and it's the same declaration as you did in the other view. And we're going to once again delete this, and there we go. As you can see, Xcode detected the IB action that we previously declared, and that's why I had that little filled in circle. And now we've basically connected this file, implementation file, to our header file. So basically the train of thought here is that, okay, we have a text field that's connected, a label, and we have this action that when you touch up inside of here, it'll trigger this code, which is detailed in the implementation file. So we need to write the code for how to click the button and what it actually does. And so to do so, within our curly brackets, which is pretty much the organizational feature for each method in Objective-C, we need to actually take the text. First, we're going to take the text from the text field, and then we're going to actually transfer. We're just going to set it equal to the text of the label. I'm going to comment my code, which is with the slashes, just so you can see line by line what's going on. But first, we're going to get the text field string. So this is an NS string. You should get yourself familiar with all the defaults and with all defaults in Objective-C. It's like NS strings. You have integers, or you can do NS integers, and those are basically just what they have, like the built-in libraries to handle all this stuff. So in our case, we have an NS string, and that string is going to be text field string. We're going to set it equal to, and now we need to assign the text field that we declared its text to this string. So we're gonna start. We're gonna type in the name. What is it? I think it's message text field or something like that. Message text field. You see the suggestion. Hit enter, and then a property of it. These are like given properties. You do dot, and that gives you access to properties. We're gonna do dot text. Of course, you're obviously not gonna know like all of the given properties. So what you could actually do is you could highlight over this, right click it, and you could jump to its definition. Okay, that didn't leave me. UI text field, let's jump to that definition. Okay, and this gives you access to the UI kit code, and you can see all the declared stuff. Now, this is overwhelming probably if you are new to this, but if you were really curious and you want to see where all the stuff is and what it has to offer, you can see here, like this is the text, this is what we want. So if you wanted to get the text, it's right here, the text color. These are all stuff you could call and play with. In our case, I guess it really doesn't matter because I'm telling you what it is, but just so that you could get and learn things on your own, that's what you do. So at this point, we've taken the message text field that we've assigned here, connected to the code, and then within our code, whenever the button's clicked, what we're going to do is we're going to call this method that assigns the text of it to our string. Now that we've assigned the text to our string, we need to set the string to our label. So in order to do so, what we're going to do is we're going to use its message label, name of our label, dot text, and we're just going to set it equal to our text field string. So whatever text we took from the text field text, we're putting in the label text. Honestly, you could do this in one step, but for the sake of cleanness, I'm just going to make it two. But yeah, if you want to do one step, you literally just do message label dot text equals message text field dot text, and you could call it a day. Yeah, so do whatever you what you want. You can test and play around with that. So at this point, when you set this text equal to it, the message label is constantly looking for that, and when it sees it, it's going to update our label in this view because we've connected that too. So you won't really have to actually do anything more than that. So that's all we have to do. But there is one other thing we are going to do that may not make sense but will be helpful. We're going to eliminate the keyboard, because what you're going to see is when we type on the keyboard, a keyboard flies up, but it doesn't automatically dismiss itself. So we're going to make it dismiss itself. We're going to say keyboard dismissed in the comments, unimportant for you guys. And what we're going to do is we're going to start with a square bracket. We'll do message text field, and we're going to say resign first responder. So basically, when a text field comes up, it becomes the first responder, meaning that it's the most important view in the hierarchy, right? Because it's in front of the screen, and obviously if the text field's showing, that's where your attention is. You're supposed to be typing something right now. So resign first responder just tells it to dismiss itself, and if you actually hover over it, there's always a quick help on the side, which is pretty nice, and it's like notifies this object that it has been asked to relinquish its status as first responder. So basically, in this case, for a text field, it resigned the keyboard. Yeah, and with those 3 lines of code, we're pretty much ready to go. And you can just run this. I'm running on a 7 Plus, which is actually going to suck because the screen is absolutely massive, but we'll make ends meet. I'll let it load. As you can see, simulator popped up. Oh, it is very tiny. I have to scale it up a little bit. We'll go up to 75%. That'll leave fit. Actually, we can go 100 because it doesn't really matter. Yeah, okay. It's a little large, but you'll be able to see it. Okay. So in our text field, we can enter a message. So we're going to type in, I'm going to type it on the keyboard because you can't really, yeah. Okay, fine. I'll do it here. HELLO space U. Okay. Screen is so massive that you literally can't see the top and the bottom at the same time. That's annoying. Okay, now you can see that both of them. And so, as you can see, even if you hit enter or something like that, it's not going to dismiss itself. So that's kind of annoying. And that's what I'm saying. When you hit enter, there we go. That's exactly what we wanted it to do. In the line of the process basically was when we hit enter, it triggered that IB action, right? And it went to our .h, which said we had an IB action called button clicked. Went to the implementation file and digged up the definition. And within the definition, it basically says to take this text, put it in a string, and take that string and assign it to the label. And then we resign the first responder, which is why when we touch this, when we hit enter, it actually leaves us alone. And you can literally edit this message and it will keep working. I don't know if it works with emojis. I'm kind of curious. Yes, it does. So yeah, you can do stuff like that. And that's pretty much it for the first video. We'll get more detailed and a little bit more into better applications, but let me know if I can teach this any better, explain this any better, or if there's anything specifically you want to learn. I'm self-taught, so I'll do the best I can. Thank you.